Hello again and welcome to the Franchise Everything podcast, when we talk about everything and anything in franchising. And today we've actually got a special guest by the name of Kate Groom from Franchise Accounting and Tax. Hello, Kate.
Hi, Glenn. It's good to be here.
Thank you. I was about to say nice to have you here. Thanks for joining us. We are at the National Franchising Convention on the Gold Coast. How's your time been?
It's been excellent. Always good to reconnect with people in franchising.
Yeah, you're up.
And
Yeah, it's been a good time, hasn't it?
It has been a good time.
Yeah, and you can hear a bit of background noise in the background. So if you're listening to this, if you're watching it, you might know where we are. You actually probably know where we are if you're watching it, even because it's pretty tight in here. So now the thing that we want to talk about is something that's actually I think is a fantastic thing that you do. Your business partner Peter Knight and yourself at Franchise Accounting and Tax do something called a Franchise Pre-Purchase Review, which I think is fantastic. Tell me about what it is. Let's start with that. What is it?
Okay. It's a part of the financial due diligence for franchise buyers. And what it does is it helps them understand the cost structure of the business that they're looking to buy. And from that, they can work out what sort of sales they need to achieve to make a living and repay their debt. And that then gives them a foundation for having a conversation about the financial prospects of the business. So it's a first stage part of the financial due diligence.
Yeah. So you refer to it as a pre-purchase review, okay? At what stage are people engaging you for this? How does that all look?
Yes, so they've usually engaged with the franchisor. They've found a brand that they like, a business that they're enthusiastic about, and they've received usually a disclosure document or at least some financial information. So they're not at the very beginning, but they're at that point where they're thinking, yeah, this could be for me, and now I need to find out a bit more about the money side.
So it's digging deeper time, obviously.
Yeah, it is.
So how did you come up on this? I know you've got, briefly, what's your experience in franchising? Because you come from a long, illustrious line of franchising experience. So tell us a bit about yourself and how you've come around to doing this.
Yeah, so I've been in franchising since the mid-1990s. So that's a bundle of years now.
That's a while.
Yeah, and on the franchisor side for a long time, working with franchisees on the financial side of their business, including people who were looking to buy franchises.
So you're doing that within the franchise networks you're working
that's right.
Yep.
And ended up in an accounting business with my business partner. And one of the things that drove us into working specifically with franchisees was that we'd done some education work with franchisors and their franchisees. And often they come in without a lot of advice. And accountants are busy people. Doing a small piece of advice work for a possible business owner is not always very appealing for them. So we worked on how could we make something available to franchise buyers and developed that over a number of years to give them a good platform for starting off in business.
So you mentioned there that the role of their accountants playing. So I know in the franchise stuff that I've done previously, obviously, accountants have different levels of experience and exposure to franchising. So can you touch on how that impacts a purchase or a potential purchase?
Yes, so that is true. Many high street accountants, if you just rock up to one, will have had some exposure to franchising. Probably not, in most cases, high profile clients in their firm. So there are some accountants who have a lot of franchising clients, but the majority, it might be one or two mums and dads who've got a business. And many accountants have experienced somebody having a franchise that hasn't gone so well. So what you often find is that the accountant either has no experience of franchising and the due diligence, or they've had not so great an experience, or they've heard something on the news or in the media. And that means that the prospect tends to get short shrift from them. And we take a different view, which is that if you're looking to buy a franchise, the decision to buy it is yours. And whether we like a brand or don't like a brand, it's not our job to tell you should get this.
You're agnostic about the brand.
Yeah, we are. And occasionally, yes, we do come across business opportunities where they're a little bit questionable. But again, we try not to bring our own opinions into it. So we'll say to people, look, here are the financial risks, and here are some things to really think carefully about before you go forward. And very often in those circumstances, the buyer makes their own mind up because they don't like the risk. So it's really about risk assessment.
So what does the pre-purchase review look like? How's it structured? So if someone engages you, say, can you do one for me? What does it look like in that process to do it?
Great. So we start off by getting whatever information they've got, and that can be a range of things. Sometimes it's very detailed, sometimes it's less detailed. We ask them to give us what they've received. Ideally, we want them to have got a disclosure document because that's got the setup costs in it. We want to know those as well.
And the disclosure document, for those who don't know, is the thing that the franchisor must provide to them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we encourage them to ask for that early, even if that means giving a refundable deposit to the franchisor to get that document. Mm-hmm. So we use that. We use some of our own experience. We might ask the prospective franchisee to do a bit of research into local rents, for instance. We ask them to think about how they might finance the business. And from that information, we build a financial model. And that financial model also takes into account that they've got to eat and pay the mortgage or the rent, and they've got to send their kids to school if they've got kids. So we think not just about the basics, but if it doesn't make money for you working in the business, that's going to be a problem too. So we take that, we'll have a bit of interaction with them while we work on the numbers, and we'll come up with a financial model and also a perspective on some of the risks. Some of those risks are universals, and some of them are quite specific to a particular brand or a particular situation. We formulate that into a document that's got numbers in it, but also words.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk to them about that in a phone call. And through that process, they become familiar with the numbers. They start to own and ask questions about the numbers. And they have the numbers presented to them in a way that makes sense to a human being that's not just a legal document.
So I was going to say, how does this go for non-financial people? So there's a lot of people, obviously, with financial literacy is at varying levels. So how do you find that engages? Have you got some differing experiences there?
We actually find it's fantastic.
So I just want to cut because I reckon that worries a lot of people very much.
Yeah. Absolutely. They think talking to an accountant, and most people don't really have an accountant anymore. A lot of people are either using a high street tax agent or online for doing their tax. So they don't have an accountant, and they have this, oh my goodness, they're numbers people and it'll be spreadsheets and I'm already confused and I don't really understand this document. So we speak like normal people. I understand what it's like being a franchisee. So we explain to them things in plain English. We present the numbers in a way that's clear and easy for them to understand. So yes, there are numbers, but we explain how they're put together. They can see how they're put together, and we break it down into sales targets by month or by week so they can get a good feel for the numbers. But then we also explain those numbers in words so that they can read it. And when people look at the numbers and read the numbers and hear us speaking about the numbers, regardless of their financial background, they really start to build confidence in that. And we're not teaching them to be an accountant. We're teaching them to be an informed buyer through engaging in the numbers themselves.
So it sounds like quite a collaborative approach. Is that a good way to describe it?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really easy for advisors to get into we're going to produce a spreadsheet for you, and here's your numbers. We've done them inside our office, and there you go. We don't think that's a good background for franchising, because we need that business owner, when they go to a bank, they've got to be able to explain how they got to their numbers, and this is the first part of that.
Well, I can imagine a report like yours involving that in some way into the finance process could actually help the finance process.
Definitely. And we speak with the folks at Frandata about how this helps franchise buyers be well prepared when they go to a bank. Or even if it's not a bank, let's say they've got a whole lot of cash and it's their own money, and so there'll be no interest. They don't have to go to a bank for a loan. But if you're putting in your own money, you are the bank. And so you should be
treating
at
it
least
the same way.
at least as disciplined as a bank.
So it's a common phrase I hear, but are you still a person who believes the phrase that due diligence, there just isn't enough due diligence for people buying franchises in many cases?
Yes, I think that's correct. I suspect there's a lot of conversations that happen in franchising, but often those conversations are very general. And having a firm foundation for asking questions, like going to 10 existing franchisees and saying, here's the numbers that I've got to achieve compared with what you've achieved. Do you think these are realistic? Is a much clearer question than, is it going okay for you?
Yeah.
Or I've worked out my numbers based on cost of goods of 30%. How does that compare with yours? Is really specific. And so we think it's not just important to ask lots of questions, but ask good questions and in particular on the numbers, because those questions not just are validating your decision to buy or not, but they're helping you build financial muscle that helps you be a better business owner.
Do you think potential franchise buyers, and you would come across a lot of them and talk to them, do you think there's still the case that they have too many generous assumptions about brands? They see a big brand, they think the brand, well, it's got to work because there's so many of these brands. Do you think that's still a thing?
Yes, definitely. And
because it terrifies me. I see it sometimes at an expo, and at Franchise Expo, we've been to every Franchise Expo for 10 years, and they come up and talk to me and they say, because they see me as we're agnostic as well, we're no brand in particular, and they might say, oh, what do you reckon's a good brand? And they might say, this brand's good because, they've got lots of sites.
Yeah, or I like this. This is a real example. I like this particular brand because my child likes the food from it. And that's not a good reason to buy a business. When the
child grows out of the food.
Yeah, that's right. But a big brand can be helpful, but it doesn't mean that the performance is great. And particularly since COVID, things have changed for a lot of brands.
Yeah, very much.
So even
not as reliable, is it?
Yeah. So even a brand that's been historically reliable isn't necessarily going to be reliable in the future. And some brands that have been not so good in the past have fixed up some things in their business.
Yeah, we've seen some changes. Yeah. Definitely changing of the guard in a number of some flips of businesses' performances for sure. So what do you say to people? Look, I can imagine you'd come across people who are so set on this particular business and this brand, should I say? They're so set on this brand. If you go and you look at the numbers of that location, because everything is specific to their location. Yep. What do you say to them to not convince them otherwise, but to open their eyes and alert them to some concerns? How does that go down?
We find that the numbers do a lot of the talking. So if the numbers are unachievable, then people usually make their own mind up, which is refreshing that even a very non-financial person can look at a set of numbers and go, I don't think I can possibly achieve that. And we've seen that with some people, particularly where the rent's been very high in a particular location, that they'll say, yeah, I like this brand, but I can't make the numbers work. And so it comes out of them doing what I think financial due diligence was always intended to do, which is understand the business and work out for yourself. If we need to be direct about the risks, we will be direct. And often people will look at those risks and say, yeah, I understand that risk and I'm prepared to take it. And that's their own choice. Occasionally we'll have to give really clear guidance, particularly like if it's right at the end of a lease term and there's not very much time to get your investment back. There are very specific conversations to have there about the risk. But mostly we find that even the least financial prospect doesn't need somebody to tell them whether it's a good or bad idea. They will work it out for themselves. They will make the right decision for themselves. And in the few times where we've seen one that we go, that's really marginal, they actually decide for themselves that it's not a good idea.
How are you received by brands? So franchisors who you're advising people, whether I can imagine that it's different when it's an independent accountant and they're doing it, they don't see it, but you're a person who's got a profile within franchising.
Yeah.
Do you strike fear in franchise brands, or do they court you? How does that all work? What does it look like?
That's a great question. So we used to be considered to be a bit scary because I think franchisors have got lots of experience of accountants being not helpful.
Yep.
Now, I'd say that there's a lot more franchisors who really like that we are in this space and our experience and background, and that we are keen on helping people get good advice. So we're getting positive feedback from franchisors. It's still hard for franchisors to direct people to us. They often find that salespeople don't necessarily want to do it.
They're worried about what the result might be.
Yeah. But if
they are confident in their brand.
Yes.
Yeah.
That more and more franchisors are seeing that we might be an answer to their problem of how do we firstly get people doing the right due diligence, but also working out the numbers. And they can see that we can help them with that in a way that they probably can't. And also just from being exposed to people like Frandata, we're building credibility as a part of the services that help well-qualified, well-financed people to get into franchising.
So are brands referring you? Have you got brands out there who are referring
Yes,
new
yes,
clients?
we have.
Okay.
We have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that increased or is it?
Yeah,
still
it's definitely increased and broadened into quite a range of industries. In fact, we had a franchisor come to us at the last expo in
Yep.
Melbourne, who's been, I don't know, this guy's been the COO for 5 or 6 years and was really excited to see us because he wants his prospects to do good due diligence and has never been able to find anybody that he can send them to that gets franchising, is prepared to learn about the model so we can understand it and help the prospect. So that was really, really encouraging.
Would you say that independent accountants who haven't had much exposure to franchising, would you say they're even more of a risk to franchisors in getting deals done and things going through? Because
yeah.
lack of understanding maybe breeds, I don't know what, then I'll say you probably shouldn't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they will just say, oh, you shouldn't do it. And we don't take that approach. We want to educate people. We're keen to understand franchise models so that we can actually, when we come to things like this, we talk to franchisors, we can give them some feedback. That's helpful, I think, to improving the state of the industry. So we want to give back in that way. We want to be a positive contribution to franchising because even though there's some not so great stories in franchising, over the 30 years that I've been in it, I've seen plenty of people do really well. And often doing really well comes from that good foundation.
So you, as we wrap it up, I'm interested in what prospects ask you. So you're at the expos and everything and talking. What do people who are just walking around wandering and looking at 100 franchise brands in expo, what do they ask you? What are the common questions? I'm sure every franchisor and every person who's looking at a franchise wants to know, what are people asking? What are the best questions to ask? Or some questions probably not to ask.
Yeah, so they do often ask, what's a good franchise to buy? And we answer that by saying we're not in that business, but we'll explain what we actually do. One of the very common things that they ask, either implicitly or explicitly, is, can you help me understand the numbers that I've got in this document and make sense to me? So one lady I was talking to this morning said, I can see all these costs and in my head, I want to get this, but I want to know that it works. So they want us to help them understand the numbers. And when they come to us and say, I want to make a wise decision, I want to understand the numbers, can you help me do that? That is absolutely the core work that we do. And they are great questions. I think in franchising, sometimes we overcook the idea that a prospect should know about the numbers. They can't know because they've never run a business before.
Or a franchise business, which has got so many more inputs.
Yeah. So when they come to us and say, I feel like this is a big investment, I need to understand it, those are great questions. They flag to us that person wants to learn about the business. And that really is a great way of approaching this. So for us, the questions to ask are very simple. I'm looking at buying a franchise. I really need some guidance on the numbers. And can you help me understand what is in the documents and what questions I should ask? And we love that kind of question. And that's the perfect questions to ask. So I think for the people who are listening to this, don't feel like you need to have clever financial questions because our job is to help you ask good questions.
Excellent. There's no better way to wrap it up than that. That's a great finish. Kate Groom, Franchise Accounting and Tax, thanks so much for joining us. From my end, I think your service and your offer is an absolute no-brainer. And I've told you that before. I've told Peter that before, your business partner. Honestly, a franchise-specific pre-purchase audit and review of a business you're looking to invest in is at a fraction of the cost of what it is to buy just about any franchise business in the marketplace is an absolute no-brainer, and I absolutely highly recommend it. So thanks so much for joining.
Thanks very much, Glenn.
Pleasure.